All right, the flood is just about to happen. Genesis chapter 6. Noah has been preparing the ark, given instructions, of course, from God, along with all of the animals that he's told to bring in. And so he's making preparations for all of this. He says in Genesis 6:17 that he's going to bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life from under heaven, and everything that is in the earth shall die. That's a sad commentary upon God's creation, isn't it? That it got so bad that God says, I've got to destroy it. But we're fortunate and blessed to have this record, though, concerning Noah. He says, But with thee will I establish my covenant, and thou shalt come into the ark, thou and all thy sons, and thy wife, and thy sons' wives with thee. A total of how many? 8. That is correct. But then it says, Of every living thing of all flesh, 2 of every sort shalt thou bring into the ark to keep them alive with thee. They shall be male and female. So they're going in by twos. Of fowls after their kind, and cattle after their kind, and every creeping thing of the earth after his kind. 2 of every sort shall come unto thee to keep them alive. That's the purpose. God is going to repopulate the earth. There are going to be many animals which will be destroyed. But God is, if you will, is keeping some back so that they can repopulate. Well, you take food, because they're going to be in the ark for quite a while, aren't they? Do you recall how long? That's right, just a little over a year they're going to be in this ark, and so you've got animals to feed, and you've got to feed yourselves as well. And as far as we know up until this time, that they have not been eating any animals. It says, Thou take unto thee all food that is eaten, and thou shalt gather it to thee, and it shall be for food for thee and for them. So we've got to feed the animals. I suppose if God wanted them to, some of the animals actually could hibernate. I don't know, but there'd be times they would not, perhaps, during this period of time. Some animals naturally do that, don't they, at certain times of the year? And but others did not. So that could take care of some of that, should God want it to happen. But we don't have any record of that. But the Bible tells us, Thus did Noah, according to all that God commanded him, so did he. Now, we have already seen back in verse 8 that Noah was spared by what? By the grace of God. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Sometimes people think that there's a problem between grace and obedience. That if you have to do anything, that some way that nullifies grace, that you're earning your salvation. And so they misunderstanding the nature of works. We do read in the Bible in Romans chapter 4 that if we were saved by works, it would not be by grace. Otherwise, works are no longer works. And of course, grace would no longer be grace. But I find it interesting that Paul in Romans 4 uses the same people that James uses in James 2 for James to show that they were saved by works and not by faith only. So what is if someone is asking the question, I thought we didn't have to do anything. I thought that we'd be earning our salvation. I thought we were not to do any works, because I read in the Bible, Ephesians 2, 8 and 9, For by grace are you saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It's the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. What should we point out when we're studying that, or what should we conclude? Okay, there are more than one kind of works mentioned in the Bible. There are some works which are forbidden. Works of boasting, works of merit. We didn't come up with the plan of salvation, did we? We didn't devise that. God did. And so it's not by works then that we have done, not by works of righteousness which we have done. Sometimes people also have a problem with saying, he was such a good man, surely he will go to heaven. What they're not realizing is they're arguing that because of your good works, you can go to heaven. And if that were the case, we don't need Christ, right? If I'm outside of Christ and I can still go to heaven outside of Christ, I don't really need Christ then, right? I just need to do the good works. I need to be a good person. But we find that we have to be in God's appointed place, as just right here, at God's appointed time. Where did Noah and his family have to be in order to be saved? In the ark. What if he had said, you know what, I'm a pretty good fella. Even by God's standard, I'm a righteous individual. And I believe I'm saved by God's grace. So I don't think I need to build that ark. What would have happened to Noah? He would have perished with the others, would he not? But the Bible says, so thus did Noah, according to all that God commanded him, so did he. So I see then that grace and law and works, all these work together. They're not exclusive one to the other, as the religious world sometimes says that they are. One of the strangest things that you will hear is that people will say we're saved by grace only through faith only. Have you heard that? That sounds contradictory to me, doesn't it, you? I'm saved by grace only through faith only. Well, it's not grace only if faith is required of me. And if it's faith only, I would think it's no grace involved in that. But we are saved by grace. We are saved by faith. We're saved by numerous things when we look at it from the Word of God. But you're well aware of that. In fact, Hebrews 11:7 tells us that Noah was saved by what? How did he build that ark? By faith. Now, did he build that ark by faith only? No. You try to explain to Noah that there are no works in faith. He'd say, let me show you the blueprint of what I had to do. And the blisters, right. That's right, and the blisters, all of that. But now Noah could not get on that ark and say, look what I have done. Look what I came up with. I knew I should do this because God was going to send this flood, and I earned my salvation. That's not the case. So it is with us. In Luke 17:10, the Bible says, so likewise ye, when you have done all these things which are commanded you, say we are unprofitable servants. We have done that which is our duty to do. And so obedience does not nullify grace. Grace does not exclude obedience, and we see that coming together for us in the case with Noah. Well, as we move on here, we find in chapter 7 that Jehovah says unto Noah, come thou and all thy house into the ark. For thee have I seen righteous before me in this generation. Now, Noah, you need to come inside now. You need to come into the ark because there's going to be a flood. And this is the place of safety. And as I just mentioned, it has always been important to be in the God-appointed place at the God-appointed time, right? Can you think of another place where God told some people to be if they wanted to be spared? The Israelites on the death of the firstborn. They had to be in what kind of a house? A house with the blood on it. And when God saw the blood, what would he do? Passover. Passover. Oh, yes. God is a God of detail, isn't he? A God of specifics at times. And we want him to be very generic and not so specific, but God is specific. Any other place where you remember somebody had to be in a certain location if they wanted to be spared? Rahab. had to be in the house. Now, not just any house. One house wasn't good as another house, right? And you had to be in the house, and they had to stay in that house, right? If you come out, if your family comes out, the blood's on your own head. And so now then we could go on and on, I guess, noting some places. But we learned today that Ephesians 2:16 says that he might reconcile both unto God in one body. That's the church. In one body. We are reconciled unto God in one body. If we're all reconciled unto God in one body, how many are reconciled unto God outside that body? Well, none. So come into the ark. And of course, today we're still, God is sending out the invitation, come into the ark, God's ark of safety, the church. Of every clean beast thou shalt take to thee by what? Sevens. Okay, you take the male and the female. How do you get seven if it's male and female? I think it's 7 pairs is the way I look at this. In other words, by 7, you've got the male and his female of the clean animal, 7 pairs of those. And then of the unclean, by 2s. Not necessarily by 7s. And he doesn't tell us. By the way, at this point of time, we don't know how the people knew what was a clean animal versus an unclean animal. Now we get over into the book of Leviticus, and we have very detailed information. This animal is clean, this one is unclean, and here's how you tell. Maybe that was already recorded for them, but you know, this is one of those Deuteronomy 29:29 passages, right? The secret things belong unto the Lord our God. God knew what was clean and unclean, and evidently Noah must have known what was clean and unclean. But we don't have a detailed record yet as to what is clean and unclean. But they were not able to offer any unclean animal to God, right? And so you might need more clean animals. That would be a reason for 7 pairs of those, if I'm understanding that correctly. How long will they be in the ark before the flood comes? 7 days. But yet 7 days, and I will cause it to rain upon the earth. And how long is it going to rain upon the earth? 40 days and 40 nights. And every living substance that I have made will I destroy from off of the face of the earth. You might take note of this. God says, I will destroy everything that I have made. Who owns it? God does. God does. And Clifton has reminded us several times about the taking of life and the things of this nature. God is the one who gave us life, and God has that right, should he so choose, to take our lives. We belong unto God. We're not ourselves, and we might think something's unfair or whatever, but really, like Jeremiah said, shall the clay say to the potter, why have you made me this way? But God is fair, God is just, and we're thankful for that. And left up to us, we'd certainly make a mess of things. But he says, I'm going to destroy it. But it was the reason. God had a reason, didn't he? And by the way, you've seen the long suffering of God up until this point. How many years? My spirit shall not always strive with man. 120 years. Noah was a preacher of righteousness, 2 Peter 2:5. And so, no doubt, Noah's been preaching, but man, everybody's corrupt and nobody's listening. How about today? There's a majority of people who are not listening, right? We can preach on the second coming of Christ. We can preach on the need to be in the church and all like this, and people will actually shake your hand, tell you a good sermon, and walk out and never obey the gospel. And so we really just can't blame that on God then, can we? Because God has given but God wants everybody to be saved. But he says, I'm going to destroy it. So Noah did according to all that God commanded him. He tells us Noah's age at this point. Noah was 600 years old when the flood of the waters was upon the earth. So Noah goes in, his sons and his wife, his sons' wives with him, just like God had told them to do, into the ark because of the flood, or the waters of the flood. God is able to destroy the wicked. But you know what else God is able to do? Save the righteous. He can protect the righteous. Isaiah 26 in verse number 20, there's going to be a judgment coming upon really the house of God, that is the people of God, in Isaiah's day. So notice what he tells them to do. Someone read Isaiah 26 in verse 20 to us.
Come, my people, enter thou into thy chambers, and shut the doors about thee. Hide thyself, as it were, for a little moment, until the indignation be overpast.
Okay, God is able to hide the righteous when he so chooses, and when people comply. Enter into your chamber till this catastrophe, if you will, this judgment that's coming upon them in Isaiah's day. God says, I can protect you. And so we appreciate that. We sing that God is a shelter in the time of storm, right? And he is that shelter in the time of a storm. So they go into the ark, and so do the animals go in. Verse number 9, they went in 2 and 2 unto Noah, into the ark, the male and the female, as God had commanded Noah. It appears that these animals are sent in by God, doesn't it? Noah's bringing them in, but I don't know how much herding he has to do, and that might be a job to go out and get all those animals and gather them up and get them into the ark. But if with God doing it, it would be rather simple. Yes. I'm sorry? Right. Right. Yeah, can you imagine that herd of deer, for an example? It's hard to herd a deer, I would think. And the two, and you've got to have. Oh wow, I've got two females. That would be a. Yeah, that might be harder than building the ark.
One interesting thing about pre-flood is the possibility that there's not the fear of man in
Right.
animals also.
Exactly.
That you read about in chapter 9.
Right. Yeah, I'd be telling one of my sons to go get the lions. I'm gonna go out and try to find a possum, and my son, you go out and get that lion, or whatever. But it does not. It just says, and there went in. There went in 2 and 2. It looks like to me they're pretty much instinct here that God is directing that. But he's telling Noah's in charge of it. He's got to make sure they're 2 and 2, and some. Right. Exactly. Well, I was hitting that very point today in the book of Philippians. It talks about that God is working in you. What God started in you, God is able to complete, but it's not contrary to our will. But it's God doing it. He's doing it through His Word today as we comply with it. And it is God who takes away our sins. We can't do that. And we have the providence of God still even today. We pray to God, and things happen. And I was thinking about the day when they were talking about the storms, and I prayed that the Lord would protect us all and do whatever. And then at the end of the day, I said, well, the storms didn't even come. The weatherman missed it. And I said, wait a minute, I prayed it would not. Maybe I ought to thank God and say God did it, not the weatherman. But that's in providence. Providence is one of those things that's, you might look at it after it's happened, but you can't just put your finger on it today and say this is what God did. But I do believe in the providence of God. One person said, I believe it's Brother Nichols, that a person said they didn't believe God heard their prayers. He said, I want you to pray that God would strike you dead. They said, "Oh, I'm not going to pray that." And they said, "Well, evidently you believe God hears your prayer." Well, so I wouldn't challenge the Lord that way, and I don't know that He would answer it anyway in that way. But 7 days, and it's come to pass, He says, 7 days waters will be upon the earth. So you get all the animals in. You don't want to do it while it's raining, because once it starts raining, it doesn't. I don't think it starts sprinkling a little bit. And you hear preachers sometimes say when it gets ankle deep or knee deep, and on. I don't think it happened that way personally, because when we read when all the windows of heaven are opened and all the floods of the waters or all the springs of the waters are coming up, it's going to be a great tsunami. A lot of destruction is going to be happening. So much so, I think it probably reshaped this earth to a large degree. I think according to what Brother Cates pointed out in the Noahic flood, you probably have a lot of volcanic activity taking place, all the things going on, subterranean waters that are coming up, as well as the floods that are coming down. You better be in the ark, right, when that happens.
The death that took place very swift.
Right, exactly. Right, and well, we've seen on video, on TV, of tsunamis when they come in from the ocean, from an earthquake. And people are running just to try to get away from it, because once it hits, it's not going to get ankle deep and then knee deep, and you're not treading water for any length of time. It's destructive. It'd probably knock you out and maybe just die from the force of it. Not only that, if you've got trees being up, you've got animals, you've got everything else. Just great, great destruction. I think it's going to happen pretty quickly. Well, yes. Exactly. So, verse 11, in the 600th year of Noah's life, and the second month, the 17th day of the month. That's getting very specific then, isn't it? The same day were all the fountains, note this, all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened. Now, if there was that canopy of water above that we thought might have taken place in Genesis chapter 1, this is where a lot of that water supply is going to take place. That is, when it opens, Brother Curtis Cates, who wrote that book, I don't know if he put it in the book or not, but he would tell us, he said, it's not raining cats and dogs. You remember what he said? He said, it's raining rhinoceroses and hippopotami. In other words, it is coming down. The windows of heaven, all the windows of heaven are open, and you're talking about it coming down, beating down upon you, and all of the springs of the ocean and of the seas, all of the water under the earth, all of that's coming up. So you just think about all the upheaval then that will be taking place as this is going on. And he even likened it to like, I believe, in Mount St. Helens when it erupted, and just how much destruction took place from some of that volcanic activity. We get over into Italy and not Rome, but what is it? Right, and Pompeii and all of the that which would take place. But anyway, so a lot of destruction. And the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. That is, it continued to rain this way 40 days and 40 nights. And so if you're talking about a universal rain coming down like this and waters continuing to come up, it's got to be a universal flood. And there might be those who tell us there's not enough rain in the atmosphere today for that to happen today. That is a worldwide flood. But you know what? That's where that canopy would come in. But not only that, God could have had that rain come anyway if you didn't have the canopy. And as far as that goes. But in the selfsame day entered Noah and Shem and Ham and Japheth, the sons of Noah and Noah's wife. and 3 wives of his sons with them into the ark. All of the beasts come in. They go into the ark, 2 and 2 of all flesh, where is the breath of life. And they went in, male and female of all flesh, as God commanded him. And then in verse 16 it says, and the Lord shut him in. What do you draw from that? The Lord shut him in. I'm sorry? He's closing the door. And he is protecting him. I'm sorry? All nice and watertight. Okay. We don't read of Noah's thoughts about any of this. Thinking about the destruction. You think maybe they had any friends? Maybe, things of that nature. Any relatives outside? I would think they probably did. And but how many people today, well, if what about my cousin? What about my this? We don't have any of that going on, and that's not really important as far as it relates to us. God's not writing the Bible to satisfy our curiosity, but the Lord shut him in. Now, God can shut the door, and God can open doors. Someone look at Matthew 25:10. Matthew 25:10. Here is the parable that is teaching us that we need to be prepared for when the Lord comes, and it's the idea of a marriage feast. And you remember the 10 birds, there were 5 foolish and 5 that were wise. The 5 wise, they had oil, right? They were prepared. Then the 5 foolish, they wanted to borrow from those who had that, and they said, "Well, we can't borrow anybody else's preparedness in application." But someone read verse number 10, Matthew 25:10.
And while they went to buy, the bridegroom came, and they that were ready went in with him to the marriage, and the door was shut.
And the door was shut. You remember when they came? We're not allowed in. You know why? The door was shut. Look at Revelation 3 and verse number 7. Revelation 3 and verse number 7.
To the angel of the church of Philadelphia write, these things saith he that is holy, he that is true, he that hath the key of David, he that openeth, and no man shutteth, and shutteth, and no man openeth.
All right. He can shut a door that cannot be opened. He can open doors that no man can shut. You remember the Apostle Paul often prayed for open doors, that God would open a door. And there was a time when he wrote to the Corinthians, I remember Tim teaching us, I believe, that he wanted to be in, was it Jerusalem or Ephesus? Because he said a great and effectual door is open. So a door, in that sense, what does that equal? What is he talking about? That'd be a synonym for what? Opportunities. God can grant us opportunities. God can also shut down opportunities. And when God shuts the door, there's a sermon in there somewhere, isn't there? When God shuts the door, the day of God's long suffering is over. The door is shut. There's coming a time there will never be another invitation given for someone to obey the gospel. Never again will the preacher or the elders or deacons or anybody or fellow Christians be knocking on the doors of others trying to get them to obey God or to come back to the church. That's going to be over at that time. And so when God shuts the door, the day of opportunity is over. And also when God shuts the door, that's a door of finality. It's over when the door is shut, right? So I have an idea that people who have gone to jail and have heard that door shut, thought, oh, that's not a good sound when that happens. But can you think about the day of God's opportunity for you and me is over? Never again another opportunity. Never again will you hear another gospel sermon to be preached. That's another thing about being lost. There's no more. You won't be bothered with a sermon anymore. No more opportunity to worship God. No more opportunity. You know why? The door is shut. And we were shut outside. And so we need to take advantage of the opportunities that we have, redeeming the time because the days are evil. And Jesus himself said, I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day. The night cometh when no man can work. And as I get older, I realize that day of opportunity for me is getting a little bit closer. I've got more years behind me than I have in front of me, all things being equal. If I can live to be 140, that'd be all right. I'll wear that Social Security out. That's right. So y'all may want to jump in early because I'm going to plan on trying to get it there. But no, if the Lord allows me to live, that'll be fine. But if not, I'll just go be with the Lord, right? And so the day of opportunity, though, that we have, that's getting more and more narrow as each day goes by. So that the Lord shut him in. So their opportunity was over, but you know what? Noah was secure. Noah was secure. His family was secure. And I love the aspect of it because how disheartened do we get when the invitations are sent out and people don't respond in a positive way? We always respond to the Lord's invitation. It's either positive or negative. One preacher said, I had them in the aisles on Sunday. He said, but the problem is they were all leaving. And so they're going out rather than coming in. But that's a discouraging thing to us, isn't it? But Noah saved his family. And God didn't overlook that. And so it is. God won't overlook you if you're obeying him. So the floods, the water was 40 days upon the earth, and the waters increased and bare up the ark, and it was lift up above the earth. Can you not just imagine the feeling of that as it's going up? Well, it goes up. 40 days and 40 nights have been used throughout the Bible. Seems like almost like a trial period, doesn't it? Nineveh, 40 days and it'll be destroyed. Jesus fasted 40 days. Moses, fasting. And so that just seems to be a significant number that God chose for whatever reason. But you'll notice the word prevailed. I think I saw it at least just here in close proximity. I can see it now. I see the word prevailed 3 times. When I think of the word prevail, that's kind of a strong word, isn't it? Meaning conquering almost. When it prevails against something, it overcomes. And the waters prevailed and were increased greatly. The waters prevailed exceedingly, 19, upon the earth. And all the high hills that were under what? The whole heaven were covered. Now, water seeks its own level. And if all the high hills under heaven, if all the mountains were covered, that has to be a universal flood, doesn't it then? Yet there are those who think it was just Mesopotamian area. But it wasn't. It was the whole. 15 cubits upward did the waters prevail, and the mountains were covered. How tall, how high is 15 cubits? About how high? Okay, well, 15, it'd be close to 22 to 25 feet. Well, as the ark is going over the mountains, it doesn't need to bottom out on any of those mountains, right? So at least then, as it would go over the highest mountain, I don't know what the highest mountain is. You people who study geography may know what that is today. But it would be then at least 25 feet above that. And of course, God could keep it off that mountain if he wanted to anyway. I don't know if it would set down. Deep.
Picture in my head.
Right.
It didn't sit on top of the water.
No, I would think with all the weight in it that it would have to come down, but how? I don't know how much it would. Of course, you got the water displacement to where it wouldn't have to be too deep. But I'm told, and I'm just going by what people who are smarter than me telling me on this, that it could actually right itself. It could turn to a 90-degree angle. I wouldn't want to be in it if it's 90-degree angle, but it could right itself. It's not made for sailing. You don't have rudders, sails on it. You're not going from here to there. You're just needing to float, basically bobbing. Right. And so I don't know if it would have ever hit a mountain anyway. God took care of that, either by making sure it never went over any of those, or if it were over them, it would not go down that deep. Be sort of interesting. Mount Everest is the highest as of today. And people try to climb that, don't they? It takes a lot of water to cover that, wouldn't it? So all flesh died that moved upon the earth. I'm taking it that had the breath of life in it. Fish, other animals that would live in the waters could survive without being in the ark. Because it says in verse 22, and whose nostrils was the breath of life, and of all that was in the dry land or the earth died. And every living substance was destroyed, which was upon the face of the ground, both man and cattle, the creeping things, the little creatures then, and the fowl of the heaven. Well, they had nowhere to light, because it's not just going to stay this way 40 days. It's rained hard 40 days, but how many days does it stay? 150 days before it starts to come down any. And then God will start letting it drain. Which makes me wonder about the Grand Canyon and the Mississippi deltas and things of that. Now, I don't know that, but how did the world get some of the shapes that it has? Obviously, a catastrophic flood, I believe, would answer some of those. It also would account for the strata that we have and the differing animals that we would find in that strata, and also the trees that we find that are fossilized upside down. Right, going through all of those, going through the different strata. And so if their timetable was right, you'd have the top of that tree being maybe 10 million years older than the trunk of that tree, which would be ridiculous. And also you have what's going on here, as I'm told, that they have found fossilized fish in motion. That is, the pressure was just right, that they died in motion very quickly this way. So you don't have to have long periods of time for a fossil to form. They can be formed very quickly if the conditions are right and the pressure is right. And I remember listening to people give scientific discussions about the peat moss being, under poles that have been put in the ground, and the force that was there and how it fossilized certain things. And so everything was destroyed, but only Noah and his family then are alive. Notice verse 24. We'll stop here. And the waters prevailed upon the earth 150 days. So you've got the raining that it took to get all the water here, and then it stays 150 days, and then it will start to decrease, and then eventually Noah and the family will get off of the ark. All right? Thank you so much for your kind attention.